Friends, Namaskar, hi, and a very warm welcome to today's episode of the program. Remember what we are going to do in today's episode? Well, in today's episode, we are going to welcome the first decade of the 20th century. In order to do that and to reach the year 1900, let us sit back comfortably, close our eyes, and imagine that we are traveling back 121 years sitting in a time machine. Now that we have reached the year 1900, let us try to imagine and talk about the world around that period in the year 1900. What do we see? The two most important powers are US with its vast areas and resources, and who is the other one? Any guesses? Well. The most powerful European country is the British Empire. The British Empire in the year 1900 is ruled by Queen Victoria, the longest serving British monarch in modern history. And their empire is so big that it is said the sun never sets on the British Empire. The other European countries which are also powerful are France, the German Empire, the Russian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. Who are the Ottomans? The Ottoman Empire is controlling the Balkan states like Bulgaria, Greece, etc. And the rulers are in Istanbul, the Turks. This is the background. Out of all the countries that we find, most are monarchies, and the only democracy is United States of America. But that particular democracy is also nothing like the modern day democracy, because in that democracy, the African Americans and as well as the women do not have any voting power. What about us in India? India is the jewel of the British Empire, and our independence is a good half century away. Though science and technology has developed to a certain extent, the main source of energy is the steam engines, and the waterways are full of steamships which are navigating the world, and there are railroads, particularly in the United States of America, which are run by steam locomotives. Motor car in its nascent forms are there, but it is so far not mass produced. This is what we have the world in the beginning of the 20th century. Most of the countries in Asia and African continent are colonies of the Western powers. As we start the century, we find that in the year 1900, a new political party, the Labour Party, is established in the United Kingdom. In itself, it is not a very major incident, but for the future century, it has got a lot of significance. And this was the first party which was a coalition of the trade unionists and the left-leaning liberals of the time. Remember, this was before the formation of the Communist Party in Soviet Russia. Then in the year 1901, another event takes place. Queen Victoria, the longest serving British monarch, dies after completing a reign of 64 long years. She took up the British throne in the year 1837 and died in the year 1901. And for 64 long years, She was the British Queen. She was succeeded by whom? She was succeeded by Edward VII, and her death has ended the Victorian era, which has been made famous in the modern history. Moving on from this, what we see that in the year 1901, Rudolf Diesel, a German engineer, develops the internal combustion engine, and based on this invention, Henry Ford had manufactured his Ford Model A in the year 1901, 1902, and this completely changed the face of automobiles in the world. Automobiles, particularly for the Americans, became a distinct possibility, and in the next 5 to 7 years, at least in the United States of America, the motor vehicle became very popular, and which caused slowly the end of the horse-drawn carriages. Also in the year 1901, Brownie camera was invented, and Kodak Eastman Company started the concept of snapshots and started manufacturing the Brownie camera. Although the company is no more, this was the company which made photography within the reach of the common persons and started the foundation of the digital photography of today's world. To me, the major event of this decade happened in the year 1903. You see, at the turn of the century, though there were a lot of enthusiastic and dedicated people who were actually trying to develop the aircraft, so far, nobody was able to develop a machine which was fully controlled by men and which flew in the air. In the year 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright, better known as Wright brothers, were able to fly their aircraft Kitty Hawk in Ohio in US, thus making history by flying a heavier than air machine which was fully controlled by the human beings. In the year 1901, Marconi, an Italian, was able to make transmissions without wire, that is the wireless transmission, and change the field of communication forever. Because once Marconi was able to introduce the wireless, communication became very, very fast and easy henceforth. In this decade, in the year 1908, the photocopy machine was developed, and it made copying easier, and this was the forerunner of today's scanned sophisticated document copies. Another very important event of the decade started in the year 1904. You see, at that point of time, there was main communication between countries by waterways, and the steamships used to be the main transportation system. If you want to traverse from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific in the American coasts, you have to travel the entire length of South America and reach Pacific or Atlantic, whichever way you are liking to travel. In order to circumvent and avoid this, it was decided that there should be a canal in the narrowest part of Central America. The narrowest part of Central America happened to be in the newly independent country of Panama, which gained its independence from Colombia very recently. So it was undertaken to develop a canal, dig and develop a canal to avoid the long and tedious journey via South America. This canal was started in the year 1904. It is a 77-kilometer canal and one of the major engineering projects of the time. And it was a very difficult project. It took 10 years to complete, and it was finally completed in the year 1914, in the next decade, in the year 1914. And there were a lot, of course, great hardships and loss of a lot of lives in this project. But ultimately, when the canal was finally opened, it changed the maritime travels completely for the years to come. The decade had a lot of other things. There were natural calamities like a famine in China and an earthquake in the year 1902 and 1905. The first decade had its share of political assassinations. In the year 1901, Italian Emperor Umberto I was assassinated. And in the year 1901, the then American President William McKinley was shot in Buffalo, New York, and died after 8 days. Then in Manchuria, the fourth-time Japanese president and the High Commissioner of Korea were also assassinated. In India, what we find? We have the first martyrs of the modern era. Khudiram Bose and Prafullo Chaki, two young Indian revolutionaries, both from Bengal, had a failed assassination attempt on the magistrate called Kingsford in Muzaffarpur in Bihar. Unfortunately, this was not successful. Khudiram Bose was arrested and he was later on hanged. But Prafullo Chaki fought with the police and ultimately he committed suicide. The first martyrs of the Indian freedom struggle of the 20th century. Then again, in the year 1904, an event took place in Africa, which I should say is the most tragic and shameful event of the decade. Germany, or rather the German Empire, was actually having its colony in German Southwest Africa, what is in present day known as Namibia. In the early part of the decade, two tribes called Herero and Nama, they revolted against the German atrocities committed by the German Empire soldiers in the German Southwest Africa. The Germans, in order to suppress the rebellion, had committed the first genocide of modern period and almost wiped out both the Herero and the Nama tribes. In fact, 90% of the Hereros and Namas were killed in the genocide. This is still a controversial point and a bone of contention between present-day Germany and Namibia. Now to some news of some independence of countries and some little bit of wars. In the year 1902, Cuba got its independence from USA. And in 1905, Bulgaria declared its independence from the Ottoman Empire. There were a few wars also in this decade. We had the Second Boer War, which ended in the year 1902. Then again, in the year 1905, there was a conflict between Japan and the Russian Empire. And can you imagine who won? The Japanese Imperial Army were able to decisively defeat the might of the Russian Empire. So like this, the major events of the first decade had unfurled, and as the decade draws to a close, it is time to draw a close to today's episode. Before going, I would like to tell you that though I have tried to cover most of the major events of the decade, I may have missed out on something. If I have, I do apologize and request you all to please let me know so that I would be more careful in future, and also if I miss out something, I would be able to learn those events. With this, I would be ending the program with a big namaste, and I will be seeing you soon in the next episode. Thank you. Bye.